Welcome to Which Way From Here Extras, where I provide bonus content to the main series. In today's episode, I interview my good friend Jeni Higgins about the book, The Horrors of the House of Wills, a paranormal investigator's most terrifying case by Daryl Marston. I asked Jeni to do this interview with me when I found out that she had read that book. Because I really appreciate that she had read it so that I didn't have to, because I didn't and still don't want to read that book, even though I'm starting to get the impression that maybe I should, because there's probably in the layers of self-published, not very well edited lines and sentences, there's probably some really good information in there that would be interesting for me to find out. And I'm having a hard time convincing myself to do that. So yeah, I asked Jeni to do this interview with me because I thought it would just be a fun thing to get into about her impressions of the book, her impressions of what she thinks is going on at the property, because Jeni is a gifted, intuitive, and witchy type lady. So we had a really fun time going down that rabbit hole about the entity that exists at the House of Wills. So I will do a bit of not really a warning as much as an intention setting. When I did this interview, it was a lot of fun, but at the end I felt very tired. So when it comes to talking about entities, you always want to set the intention that you will not be accessed by them, which I did not do at the start of this interview, and that was a mistake on my part. So think about the no consent. You do not consent to be accessed. Chances are you'll be perfectly fine, but just to do due diligence, and I'm going to get more into this in the show proper, but whenever dealing with the paranormal, supernatural entities, that thing, you always want to sit in your sovereignty. So before you continue listening to this podcast, simply intend that you do not consent to be accessed by anything that is not your energy, that is source aligned. I know that might sound silly to some of you, but humor me. I promise it's worth it. And nothing else, is just a good exercise in remembering that you are a sovereign being, you have autonomy, and no one gets to access you or treat you in any way that you don't want to be treated. So yeah, do that. Then press play and listen to the fun ridiculousness that is our conversation about the horrors of the House of Wills. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy. All right. Perfect. So let's talk about, what's the book called again? The Horrors.
Oh, it's so scary. The Horror of the House of Wills. One man's true story of, whatever that brought him to his knees.
What's his name again? Do you remember the guy's name?
Dylan? Something?
Okay. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah. This is me. I'm a professional. Did I research? Nah. That's what you're here for.
Well, and with that, I mean, I listened to the audiobook while I was working, and I'll get into that. So we're going to be getting a lot more of like impressions than necessarily. On page 52, he says this, where it's going to be like, I feel that it was like this, kind of, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't.
Okay. So. Daryl Marston. There we go.
That's it.
Professionalism.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, so I obviously have not read this book. It was like what, self-published? It looks like it was self-published.
I think so. Or if it just maybe like a small.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just looked. I mean, this is very unfair of me to blindly judge something. and I'm going to do it anyway. It looked pretty silly. So I was just kind of like, eh. But you read it for all of us. Like you took
I took one for the team.
one for the team
I did. I took
and
one for the
read
team. Listen to it. Listen to it while I was, working on a spreadsheet and puttering around my house. Basically the way that I found this book was a friend of mine in Cleveland posted that she had gotten it, and I think it was like around last October or whatever, and I was super into my seasonal I need to read scary stuff phase, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of this place. I had no idea. And this dude who is, part of a well-known ghost researching team that is like, kind of started it all for the TV, series and everything like that. I was like, so it's got to be, it's got to be legit. And if you wrote a book about it, I'm sure it's probably terrifying. And that place sounds kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
So I got on a wait list through my library app for the audiobook so I can listen to while I was working. And I remember asking my friend, I was just kind of like, so what did you think? And she was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Can't wait for you to do it and you tell me what you think. Like, oh, okay.
right. Like, well, it exists. It certainly is there.
It is a book. It is a book that he published. Um, and and a lot of it, I think a lot of my impression of it was, being a voracious reader, I get, my inner editor really comes out. And I don't know who his editor was, but there was, some timeline issues. There were some contradictions, like just like straight up contradicting himself. Where in, the first part of the book, he's talking about how anytime he goes on a new investigation, he wants to know as little about the place as possible. He
Right.
doesn't like to know, so that way it's not influencing him and influencing his actions.
Of course.
And then as it goes on, he's like really mad at his friends for not telling him what. I mean, he was like, yeah, don't tell me anything about it. Why the fuck did you tell me anything about it? Oh my God, jerks. And it's just kind of like, hey, bro, I mean, you really kind of can't have it both ways.
Right. Right.
Either you get the dossier in the packet or you don't.
Right.
And then you can't be pissed at your friends who took you here voluntarily and didn't tell you anything about it when you're that much of a, like, no, yeah, don't tell me, dude. Don't, no.
Right.
So,
That's yeah. So that's a nice like so that sets the tone, right? Where
right.
this gent and I'm going to try to be as fair as possible, especially since I have not read it and therefore do not have a right to have any kind of opinion, but I do anyway. He he had a legitimately intense experience at this
Mm-hmm.
place. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
he felt traumatized by his experience and he wanted to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
And like with the few little interviews that I saw, which were also like his interviews were contradictory as well, which is interesting that you pointed that out because it was like and they were just like silly little interviews with local
Mm-hmm.
papers, like, but it was still just like, my dude, what's going on? What's going on with you? Like, he just didn't even know how to tell his own story, which I thought was fun, which was really fascinating. So let's start, like, and I know you're going off impressions because you didn't give it your full attention, but
Mm-hmm.
let's like start from the beginning as much as you can and just kind
Okay.
of through the major beats. much as you can remember.
Okay, so the book, I'm going to start out with like my own personal uh like I said, I had never even heard of the House of Wills until my friend had posted about it. And I looked it up and looked up the history, and um was it, did it start out as like a Masonic, was there like Masonic temple kind of involved at some point?
So it was designed by a 33-degree Mason
That's
who
it.
like put all of that in there,
That's it.
all the different symbolism, and designed it specifically with the intent oh sorry, of harnessing and amplifying energy because
Okay,
he was designing it. It's a German singing hall.
that's it. Okay.
All that, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then it became like that, like a Hungarian cultural center or something. Um, and and I was looking, and then of course the funeral home, the largest African American funeral home. Um, and I was looking at all of that, and I was kind of researching it, and I wasn't really finding anything that was terribly frightening.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, oh, so this dude, if he wrote a book about this, I'm expecting, poltergeist. I'm expecting a friend to go like screaming backwards and yanked around, and like whatever that movie, that House on a Haunted Hill movie was, that like had the doctors. That's what I'm expecting, which
Sure.
might have been uncharitable, maybe a little bit high, but it was like, oh, okay, okay. So he starts out, and and in the book he's talking about how much experience he has investigating haunted places. Um, he doesn't necessarily have, how can I put this? He's not one to sit there and say like, oh yeah, I'm totally sensitive to uh energies and spirits and things like that, but he's also is, if
Right.
that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's not going to call himself like a medium, or by any stretch of the means, but like so many of us, he is sensitive to that. And talking about the first time he ever saw a person who was not alive, um and kind of getting into that, and all of his experiences with the TV show, and how it was, I want to say that it was when he went to Cleveland, it was somewhere in the teens, like maybe 2016, something like that. 2015, I don't know, somewhere around there. His friends, he had some friends from somewhere in Pennsylvania or the Ohio border or whatever, say, hey, we're going to go check out this place called the House of Wills in East Cleveland. And you guys should totally come with us, or you should totally come with us. And he was like, oh, okay. And this is when he starts with like, don't tell me anything about it. Don't tell me anything about it, blah, 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 blah. Um, so they get there, and he they're being led around by like a daytime caretaker or something like that. And he's like, okay, well, before we go in, we're gonna have to clear the place, like with firearms,
Oh,
because it's
oh,
East Cleveland.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, like actually like of vagabonds and
Right.
okay,
Right.
okay.
Which I thought, and then of course he goes into how he knows how to do that with firearms and stuff, and he always is strapped
Yeah.
and whatnot, and how um he got out his trusty sidearm and stuff, and it was kind of like,
Okay.
that's a little, that's like escalated pretty quickly, like going after, with guns blazing, um
Literally. Oh my God.
literally, literally. And so like this caretaker person was kind of like, well, I don't stick around and anytime near sunset and blah blah blah, and um just seemed really no, seemed really really like cryptic, and well, you'll just have to talk to the other person who takes care of this place, and she'll show you around. And this is once again where like kind of the writing style is a little juvenile, I
Right.
guess. That's a good term. It's a little juvenile, where like every at the end of every chapter or everything is like, and it could also be the way that the narrator was reading it. I was just like, but I was yet to know what it would be like to be brought upon my knees in the house of wills. And little did I know that I was going to be scared out of my mind at the house of wills. So, and there was like a lot of like, like in my mind, because I'm a visualizer, and I could just in my mind there is a lot of like side eyeing and like and like looks between everybody, and not a lot of conversation, but everybody's just getting that, ooh, it's gonna be real real spooky.
Right.
And then homeboy goes off on a tangent about East Cleveland, which, speaking of uncharitable, was pretty uncharitable. I mean, like I understand that East Cleveland is rough,
Yeah.
or has a reputation of being rough, and I totally get that. I have friends who live in East Cleveland, um, and it is also one of the oldest parts of the city.
Yeah.
That is where you have all like the historical stuff, like the university district and everything like that. And just basic city, trying to think of the right words here, like economic structure, as people move to the suburbs and push further west and everything like that, the houses around there get cheaper, and then you've got like this disparity between the haves and the have-nots and everything, and it's a whole socioeconomic thing that he's basically just saying, oh yeah, this place is totally totally hood.
Right.
And it was just kind of gross.
Right. Right.
like like he never like really came out and said it, but it was like gross, just the way he was talking about it, and how unsafe they felt, and um you know the attention that they were attracting and everything like that, and and so that was a little gross.
Right.
But one of the things that they did talk about, of course, was how people in the neighborhood will cross the street to avoid it. Nobody likes to talk about it, nobody likes to look at it, they don't like walking around it. um that its reputation is just ooky.
Yeah.
So they go in, and this is kind of where everything gets a little bit muddled, because either I was might have been checking Facebook at the time, or working on something. I mean, I don't know, because it was just kind of like, okay, dude. Um, but I distinctly remember they were on their walkthrough, and he talked about like there was like a great big hall that had a bunch of like demonic statues in
Oh yeah.
it,
Okay.
which were created by, I don't know if he's the current owner or not, but it was created by the owner at the time, because he is I don't know if he's a Satanist in like the Satanic Temple, or like the Church of Satan, because like there's a difference between the two,
Right.
I mean, and so I wasn't able, because he kind of went back and forth between the two, and it's like, okay, so is he doing like rituals like Anton LaVey, or is he just like, hey, I believe in, your own agency, having your own agency. And it was really difficult to tell.
Right. And of course
So
he
he,
no
I'm
I
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and he probably had no idea the difference between the two because again, one of the brief interviews that I read where he's like, I mean, no shade against the owner, but he's a Satanist and, do what you want, but I don't want to mess with that. And I was like, oh,
Right.
you don't know what you're talking about.
And there's a lot of that in the book. There's a lot of that in the book. But yeah, and I was just like, it's like, I kind of thought that once again, somebody who is part of this world renowned ghost hunting team, that would be something they would know.
Right.
I mean,
Might be the first time that he's come across this. Like, paranormal
right.
world is just filled with these types. There's nothing, I
Yeah,
mean, it's just a bunch of goths. Come on.
right. And it's kind of, and I think it is important to distinguish between
Yeah,
the two different types,
absolutely.
because that also I think is when you start to get into, if somebody is doing rituals and things like that versus, somebody who is, like I said, believes in the free agency of the self.
Right.
So it sounds to me like the owner is somebody who does the rituals and things like that. And they walk into and they see all these weird, creepy statues that wait, was his name Daryl or
Daryl.
Dylan?
Daryl.
Like I already just forgot. Um, but Daryl was just like could not believe that the guy created them. Was just like, I don't know what other influence he had when he made them, but they were not right. And he had an episode in that room of just kind of feeling gross, just kind of starting to psychically feel gross.
Okay.
Um, I remember they go into the basement and the guide is like, well, be careful about, your like if you have asthma or anything like that. There's a bunch of mold down here. And Daryl flips out and is like, oh, so not only is this place haunted, but it's also like really unsafe. And that just
Yes.
pissed me off. And it's like, dude, it sounds, the pictures that I've seen online, this place is kind of falling apart. And that's
Yes.
part of it. You're going to have mold. It's Ohio. He's from Delaware. It's probably humid there too. But just like, oh my God, I need a respirator. Da 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 da. Like, all right, what else? Um, so as they're going through, it just seemed like there was a lot of he was running in and out of the building and pissed because of mold and pissed because it was really creepy in there and pissed because the guy was a Satanist and then he was pissed because the experiences that he had were you know super scary to him, which, and I'm going to be absolutely 100% honest with you, if I had any, even like an iota of the experiences that anybody has there, I mean, I would probably be pissing my pants
Right.
because I'm a baby. However, once again, this dude is goes on so many of these ghost hunts and stuff, and it really, I think the reason why I'm not really able to recall specifics other than like I know they heard a voice that said believe really loudly in one of the rooms, and they heard a bunch of footsteps running where there shouldn't be footsteps and stuff like that. Um, but I really do think that part of it is just because it doesn't sound like anything that was that terrifying.
Right. So it's interesting because I mean, he's been to many haunted sites before. I'm sure a lot of them were in dilapidated buildings and has heard plenty of disembodied voices and footsteps and that kind of thing. So, like, it's actually that almost makes it more interesting to me that those, seemingly uh what's the right word? Like standard haunted,
Standard.
yeah,
Hmm.
like standard haunted experiences. Like it's interesting that House of Wills somehow those standard experiences amplified in his system to a point where he lost his fucking mind.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, I, especially after what you said and kind of thinking it over and stuff like that, I can kind of understand how that exactly would happen. Like that place would probably make it even that much because, it sounds like it was built to be an energy trap.
Yes.
And what better way to amplify any kind of energy than to provoke it, you
Right.
know? So, and one of the things he was also talking about, I do remember, was that he felt like there was a dominant spirit that was kind of controlling all of the other spirits
Mm.
in the House of Wills. Sorry. That's how it was. But he feels like the which I can understand, especially with the whole kind of insidious thing that attaches to people. It's like a mold spore
Right. Yeah.
that just gets bigger. Like it, and so in my head, I just kind of see this large energy basically that is at this point so in the building itself that it's not necessarily like it's not necessarily going to be like any kind of human or anything like that. Like it's almost like the building now of
Right.
itself. And so when he's talking about it controlling, I don't it doesn't sound like it's necessarily like, oh, this, master spirit's like, hey, go touch that guy on the shoulder and see what happens. It reports back. But it does sound like there are so many, like if that place can amplify a living energy, what's it going to do with pure energy?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand where he's coming from with that, and I don't think he's full of shit. I mean, I do think in some ways he's full of shit, but I don't think as far as that is concerned he's full of shit at all. um
So before
the
we get,
book was, oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say, before we get into like theories and that kind of thing, do you like what were the major haunted moments that you can remember? Like if there were any.
Well, like I said, the ones that happened there were like the footsteps and the disembodied voices, and then like the general feeling of unease and anger and illness and
uh,
things like that. And this is where the book was kind of divided into two parts, because there was the House of Wills and then there was what came after
okay.
in his own place. And it was almost like it wasn't so much as the experience in the House of Wills, it in and of itself, that, you know, brought him to his knees. It was what happened afterwards when he got home to Delaware.
Ah, okay.
So he got home and was just terribly bothered by it, real kind of pissy with his friends for taking him there. depressed, anxiety, despair. Um, he has a couple kids, um, and was really worried about his family. He's seeing things in the house, seeing figures in the house that were not there before. Um, Everything like that. One thing that I do remember, he was it was like wintertime or something like that, and he was in his garage working on something, and he heard this buzzing noise, and there was a fly like beating itself against the garage windows inside, and then there were two, and then there were 25, and then
Wow.
so all of a sudden these flies are everywhere. And so he's just like, okay, so this is part of it. This is, clearly it is, something demonic that I brought back with me from the House of Wills. Um, I don't remember exactly what he did to cleanse himself of it. I know that at one point some a sage was involved, which I
Oh, bless him.
made that face too. Made that face too. That okay. Um,
Great. It helps with some things. It does. It's not
yeah,
gonna help you with the whatever's at House of Wills, but you know, I'm sure it helps
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's and and basically he's and this is also too when he started talking about his how his faith in the Christian God really got renewed, and basically he just prayed he's not the praying type, um but basically just started praying all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, and that really helped clean out, or at least get him better to where he was going to work and not being a jerk to everybody, and um the house just felt different, and it felt cleaner, and it felt lighter. um but then like 6 months later or something like that, um one of his sons passed away.
Oh.
Yeah, so it is sad, very sad. um and while he while he never really says that it has anything to do with his experience in the House of Wills, he's like, I also can't not believe it.
Right, right.
Like the influence stretched that far.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that fucking sucks a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Holy.
Um, yeah, yeah. So at one point, I think his friends take him or try to take him back to the House of Wills, and he's just like, F off,
Good for him.
dicks, no way. Um, and I don't remember if he went in or not. I think he did, but it was just like his faith in God protected him or something. I don't know. By this point, I was just trying to get it over, just trying to get the book over with. It was almost the end of my working day. I listened to it all day long and was just trying to get it over with. So I really, but those are the things that, like, the flies and the figures and the noises, um, and just that feeling, because
Right.
I've had that feeling before. I've
Mental health.
experienced things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the mental health deteriorating and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
and it's even funny interesting that you talk about like his irrational anger
Mm-hmm.
and how contradictory he became, especially even within his own story, within his own writing. And it's like that, having experienced the entity that's there that reached through space and time and started messing with me before I even entered physically into that space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I completely understand, even though like it's hard for me not to roll my eyes because male bravado will always make me roll my eyes regardless. Like
Yeah.
I need to be more compassionate and understand that the bravado is his way of coping with something that was so big and so intense and so out of his fear
Hmm.
that he like could only respond in this one way in order to get through it. And I have no right to judge because I did the exact same fucking thing. I used hypermasculine bravado to confront something that I was not prepared for, that was way over
Hmm.
my head. And yeah, I'm still gonna roll my eyes at him, but I'll roll my eyes at myself too. So
It's being able to recognize that, I guess. Yeah. No, I mean, I totally understand. And I don't know, man. I like his son passing away, just
yeah.
like
Oof.
coincidental or fated, or if it did have something to do with the House of Wills, I don't know. It just really, really, really sucks.
Yeah.
And I feel so sorry for him for that. There are but I'm also critiquing a book. So
Right, right,
I mean, I'm going to talk about the idiosyncrasies and the contradictions and everything, and how he just really, really, really latched on to the owner being a Satanist or a Satan worshiper, and or satanic in whatever way he is, and was just like, I'm not saying that the House of Wills is haunted because of that, because you do what you want. I just know, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ would not like that, or whatever. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but there was a lot of that, of like kind of seeming to shift the blame onto that guy and his creepy statues.
right. Which is so interesting because I mean, yeah, because that owner, there is something about him. There is something where like he like for me, like when I mm, first laid on eyes on the owner, it was just like, ugh, another goth who, you know, got his hands on a property so that he could get laid above his station. And like maybe we should stop letting goths have cool things, you know?
my, my friend my friend who introduced who got the book, got it at a signing with Daryl, and she met the owner at the same one, and she's like, yeah, they both pretty much gave me the ick, like both of them, just no.
So
Like, all
much.
right, there.
And like there's something like, and I feel like we've discussed this before, like this siren call of paranormal spots, right? That's calling
Oh
a
yeah.
type of person. And I am someone who has succumbed to this so many times because I'm fascinated by it. And it's, it's curious and it can be fun and it's thrilling. And I'm also part of the problem, right? And I have to, contend with that while also understand, like having a better understanding of the energetics of what I'm coming across
Hmm.
normally until I get my ass handed to me. Um, but like what's interesting about the owner for House of Wills is that one, I think there was a siren call to get him in there, that he was taken over and now is in certain ways complicit in whatever entity, whatever that mold like entity that has spores, he's bringing people in,
Hmm.
dismissing the haunting aspect while he's doing his tours, even though people are coming here specifically because it's haunted,
Right.
dismisses it and downplays it and like is feeding it. just constantly feeding it. And it's just, it's such a, it's a very complicated space. Everything that's happening there is so unusual, and it's in the way that it's I don't know. It's like it's bizarro. This has definitely like become my white whale a bit.
Oh, I can totally understand why. Um, because one of the things, this kind of ties back with when I was looking it up before I ever read the book or anything like that, or found out you were going or anything. Um, and I was doing research on it, and there just wasn't a whole
There's no
lot.
information. Yeah.
And a place that has that kind of history, and especially once it became a funeral home and
Yeah.
everything like that, I would almost expect there to be way more than there was. A lot of it was just, based on like the Plain Dealer and the Cleveland newspaper and things like that. Just small little articles. And here's a picture of the cloud room, here's a picture of the Egyptian room. And I wanted more of that, because people would just kind of say, kind of like what you just said. It's just like, it's bizarre.
That yeah, it's interesting that you point because we found the same thing. Rachel and I were like, why is there no real information on this?
No.
It's so important historically.
Mm-hmm.
Largest black-owned funeral parlor that was owned by the man who started the Cleveland chapter of the NAACP, the
Right.
Cleveland chapter of the Negro Welfare Association. He got the money to buy that property from a lawsuit that he had against the local housing authority because they shut down one of his previous funeral parlors
Oh,
illegally.
wow.
And he actually was
Wow.
able to win, which is another huge moment, like historical moment. And
Hmm.
how is that all getting obfuscated? Like
Yeah.
it, like why isn't there more going? And like, and then there's nothing on the owner. There is like, you can't find like dude owns a big paranormal spot and clearly has an ego, but he's not on social. He's not like you can't find information about him. He's also not doing things like utilizing the Cleveland historical money
Right.
to and why wouldn't
Right.
he take the free money?
I mean, unless his purpose is not to restore it, or his idea of restoration isn't going necessarily with preservation.
Right.
um if he's going to turn it into some chamber 3.0 or whatever, um or what, or if he's just going to let it fall to waste. But yeah, like, why is it still just rotting and falling apart, even though this guy, it sounds like, I don't know if they kind of started anything trying to fix it up, or what. They were talking about how he wants to turn it into a community center.
Right.
He wants to turn it back. He wants to give it back to the local neighborhood. um I mean, it also sounds like the local neighborhood's like, oh, no, thank you. No. But he's trying to get it back to being an integral part of that neighborhood.
Right.
um
Well, he says
but
that.
yet, well, yeah, of course. But like, and what I was talking about with like that TV show, I started looking up, like, I specifically Googled episodes of paranormal investigative shows that go to the House of Wills,
Okay.
because I you can't really, I mean, like, we said the stuff that you find online isn't, it doesn't it doesn't satisfy the curiosity, I guess, because it's like, you have this place that is supposedly just like the pool from Poltergeist,
Right.
but in a building.
Right. Right.
But then you can't, it's all like, oh, this place, it's pretty cool. Have you been to like the Franklin House or whatever it's called, or to the Lakewood Cemetery and seen the witches ball? And it's like, we all know about that. I've never heard of the House of Wills. And when you were talking about, when you mentioned that, it's just like this guy just being complicit in it and everything. I have another friend who mentioned that she has a client who does seances there,
Oh, okay.
which to that
Oh,
just kind of sounds like feeding the beast.
yep. Yeah. Oh my God.
And
That's
if you're letting people do that, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to judge her client's thought process or anything like that. I mean, if I weren't such a scaredy pants, I would be like, yo, hook me up with her because I want to sit in one of those
right.
and then figure out how to, clean myself with spiritual Brillo pads. But um I just because I'm curious, like, what do you get? Um, but I've seen, I've at this point I've seen probably about 4 TV shows that take place there, or that 3 or 4 that, and they're all kind of the same, where they have so much stuff going on that everybody's just kind of left
Shell shocked. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
did we get that on camera? I don't even know. We should probably just go.
Yeah. 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 I mean, like you said in the beginning, where you're almost expecting like Poltergeist and you're expecting the big bang and the big, like the Hollywood version of hauntings.
Hmm.
That is not how House of Wills rolls. Everything is subtle. Everything is deeply like, and this is all paranormal, but this place in particular, it plays on the 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 kind of subtle um ramping up of dread and
Mm.
of making you feel a little crazy and like and it likes and it just seems like you'll have whatever experience that you have at the house and it'll be this visceral thing for you personally, but it wouldn't be anything that someone looking from the outside would be like, that's not that big of a deal. But for you, it feels so intense because it's attacking your
Hmm.
body system. And then it's what it does to you when you leave. That is
Yeah.
the really intense thing. And like when I left, um, my next day, the way that like I felt drained and like I had gotten hit by a bus. Um, the last time I felt that drained and that exhausted by something was when I had done a wedding and I had read for like 30 people in a row or something like that, where it was
Oh yeah,
where,
sure.
right, where it was like I had nothing left. I felt like that plus like as if I couldn't fully be in my body because something else had kind of pushed me out a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right.
Mm,
Right.
mm.
And so, and I'm going to be posting our conversation before I finish my House of Wolves episode because it's taking me fucking forever to write it because it's fighting me. The story is fighting me so hard. Um,
And and maybe that's what's happening to everybody else. Maybe that's what happened. That's what's happening to the journalists. Maybe that's what's happening to everybody else. That it's such a deeply personal. It affects you so deeply and so personally, and then it fights you with this story that then all you can do is like, here's some pictures, and this place is haunted, and it's cool. Here's
right,
the
right.
history.
Here's a little bit. We'll just say what the plain dealer says because there's nothing else out there. I know. I wish I was the type of person who had the patience to like dive into archives, but I am not. I am not that person. I would love to write a comprehensive book on House of Wills, but man, that is an undertaking. But yeah, like the when I removed the entity from me, it was like, and like how you visualize it's not what's actually happening. It's just how your mind is like creating representation for you. But it was like this like gargoyle type thing that was so big. Like
Mm-hmm.
even though it was a spore, it had rapidly grown within my system. It was not even 24 hours later, and this thing was one of the biggest attachments I've ever experienced in my field. When I remove attachments and other kinds of entities and infringements, they in my mind's eye appear small. They're not, it's like how they're interacting, it's more subtle. And this thing had rapidly expanded. So it was huge in my system. Um, and like I said, it was a spore, so it wasn't even the entity itself, it was just a clone of it. And then I cleared my friend Elizabeth a few weeks later. Um, she she had an attachment as well. And like, here's how insidious this entity is. I knew she had an attachment, and yet something in me, a little voice, was like, if you tell her, she'll stop being your friend.
Oh.
Right?
Ooh.
And it wasn't even like a huge voice, because if it was a
Yeah.
huge voice that had said that to me, I'd be like, what's talking to me? It was an impression. It was this impression of, oh, if I say something, I might lose this really important friendship to me. And I just let it go, which is not. And then, like, she finally got a hold of me and she's like, hey, you know how you talked about how you had an attachment? I
Right.
think she's like, my health has been really, really bad, and maybe I have one too. And I'm like, you do. I don't know why I haven't told you. I don't know why I haven't like didn't step up and clear you. And then that's when I like became aware of that like influence over me that
Mm-hmm.
basically preyed upon um an insecurity that I didn't even know that I had, because it's not like Elizabeth has only been awesome and like totally on board with all of my weirdo stuff. She loves
Mm-hmm.
it too, has never been judgmental about it at all. And yet I had this barely deeply held subconscious fear that if I were to reveal what I knew, that she would stop being friends. So yeah, and so I had to like look at that as well, where it's like, whoa, like these things are so insidious because you don't like things you don't even realize that you hold, beliefs that you don't even know are in your system. They will
Yeah.
they will target those things and influence how you think and how you react. And like, yeah, the shit is insidious.
Ugh. Ugh. Ugh.
So when I cleared hers was even more enormous because it had been there for several weeks, and
I can
she's
imagine.
still feeling the effects of it, even though it's out of her system. Like it fucked her up. Like House of Wills is no joke. House of Wills is not a place to just go for funsies. I am now understanding. And like when people are like, "Oh my God, I want to go," I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, before I had read the book and everything like that or whatever, and you were talking about it, and um I was just kind of like, oh, I kind of want to go. But the more the more I think about it, and that's the thing is too, is using the word insidious and using the word feeding energy and everything, like I've not even been and I've devoted this much energy to it
Right.
already. Um,
Yeah.
and it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty innocent energy, but I'm still voting energy to it and thinking about it and putting that out there in the universe. And yeah, like last night I was thinking about like my methods of like spiritual cleansing or whatever, and it's like I don't even know if I would know what to do in that situation. I don't I've never experienced anything that heavy and that just complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
um that and I don't even know what I would do, and I'm not sure I want to find out
Right.
either.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and I constantly question, like, that whatever is there, I genuinely feel like needs to not be there anymore. I mean, because it's creating such harm. It's creating a whole lot of harm. And I like, for I've been going back and forth of like, I feel like my story is not done with it. Like, I feel like I'm going to be going back to House of Wills. And yet I'm really struggling with the ethics of that, because to go back, like I wanted to go back, and I still kind of do, with a ghost hunting team so that I can get access to more of the building that I can't get
Hmm.
access to with the tour.
Hmm.
But like, is that ethical of me to allow other people to set foot into that space? Even though I'm like, everyone that I talk to, because my friend John Killian, who has been on my show and I've been on his show, and he has a ghost hunting team. Like, he and I have had long conversations, and I'm like, and he believes me when I say that place is no joke. And he, like, at least, I have cleared him of other things. So even if he doesn't quite agree with how I view energy clearing, he at least entertains it.
Hmm.
Um, and like, even then, I'm like, I don't know if I want to be leading a group of people into this space, even if I can clear them, because it's not will it attach, it's going to attach, and it will play on a whole lot of unresolved stuff in people. And even if I clear it, that stuff is going to be forced up and out. And like, is that responsible of me to allow people to be put into that situation? And so like, I don't know what the answer to that question is. Like, should I go in with a team? I mean, because you don't have to do it in the space. Like, should I have a couple of other people who've been trained in the kind of clearing that I do? Should we just
Hmm.
clear it? Like, but then what happens? Because I think you're right. I think that the entity and the building are now so tied to one another that they're indistinguishable from one another. So
Hmm.
what happens if I
Yeah.
clear the entity? What happens to the space, and what happens to the people who are very tied into it? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
I don't know, because I mean it's like you almost want to go there, treating it like a historical site where you don't want to disturb anything.
Right.
You don't want to change anything, you don't want to disturb anything, but at the same time, a historical site isn't interacting on a spiritual, physical, and emotional level. I mean, my only bit of advice is if you do this, and I think you're right. I do think that, I'm pretty sure that you're going to go back.
Yeah.
But I think that making sure that the people on this team understand, or at least entertain the idea, like you said, of protection, you know, almost like treating it like, kind of like, hey, here's your spiritual safe word.
Right.
And so not only are we going to protect you before you even go in there, you're gonna get cleared when you come out, whether you think you need it or not.
Yeah. 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 100%.
I
And
mean, that would be the only way that I think that would even be responsible.
yeah, for
And if
sure.
they say no, then don't go.
Yeah. At least you can't come with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of said as much just in passing, where it's like, if you're with me, like this is how we are going to move forward so that
Yeah.
I'm acting in integrity. Oh, but yeah, like, and it's like, but am I still under its influence? Because I got influenced before I even stepped foot, you know? And I think part of that was because of the eclipse. I feel like the eclipse, like there was something about that blood moon eclipse that made everything more like, and like the thinning of the veil, like I just got access so easily. Um, and that I couldn't think clear. I wasn't acting the way that I normally would act. Like, it really amplified my most immature impulses, you know. And so it's like it's constantly like, oh, am I fully in charge of my decision making process? Fucking hope so.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to write a book that's like, my friend was possessed by the horror of the House of Wills. That's going to be my book, Daryl.
Please do.
I was uncharitable. I'm sorry for being uncharitable, but not really. It's just,
We should totally write a book together.
it would be amazing. That would be incredible. Um, maybe not about the House of Wills. Let's start someplace nicer. Uh, that isn't so scary because I am a baby. I am a baby. I watch scary movies and I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that scary. And then as soon as I go upstairs and go to bed, it's like, oh God, but what if thinking about that thing that was on the movie brings it here
Right.
under my bed? And then, I'm just imagination. Um, I just, I think that that is definitely not finished for you. And I think that also we're probably going to hear a lot more about it,
Yeah.
because it seems like a lot of the um stuff I've been seeing has been within the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being from the Cleveland area, like I said, I had never even heard of it before.
Right.
Never heard of it before. Um, had no idea it existed. And I mean, and like you were saying, just based on the historical importance of the funeral home and the civil rights movement
Yeah. Yeah.
right here in Ohio, you'd think something,
Yeah.
something, but you know, one of the other things that I'm sorry, I'm kind of like all over the place, but one of the other things that I was also thinking about too is that even before that place was built, um, I mean, Cleveland is an old city. It is an old city. And that whole part of Ohio was like kind of like political importance when the colonies were the only were just colonies.
Right.
um that whole like along the lake and everything and then you also have the anything that comes with the huge body of water
Right.
and and I mean Cleveland is just such an interesting town and it's almost like of course this place is haunted as fuck.
Right. Right. Yeah. And like we said, all the Masonic stuff, like
Hmm.
um when I did the tour, it was so interesting because it was there was a void feeling there. Like I think I already told you this, but like the entity that was there literally hid everything from me. Where like there was no stray consciousness, there were no thought forms, there was no earthbound, there was nothing. And Elizabeth made the point, she's like, yeah, there wasn't even an echo. And we were in cavernous rooms and there wasn't
Wow.
any echoes. I was like, holy shit, I didn't notice that, but she's right. Like it had done such a big like boom, so
Mm-hmm.
that I could not perceive what was there.
Mm-hmm.
And neither could Rachel or Elizabeth, both of who are very good with their intuition as well. But I did when I entered into the cloud room, um, I didn't know. So I didn't do a whole lot of research before I went. But when I stepped foot into that room, I saw in my mind's eye four men with hoods over their like bags over their heads sitting on this tiny stage that's on the very back end. And I was like, oh, this is where the Masons did their rituals. And the owner confirmed it like a little bit later when he went into his spiel. And I was like, I fucking knew it. And that was the one room where I decided to do some clearing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, nothing too crazy, but I was just like, okay, this is the one room where I feel like I need to pulse out and just like get some things moving because um like it was the only place where I felt like I even had permission to do so, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but like whatever the Masons had done, because Masons are very good at creating spaces to harvest energy. Um, like whatever they had done and whatever symbolism that they had created uh and put in place created this like perfect storm for some of the most insidious shit. like like everything, there's just everything in this building. It's such a great story if it wasn't so desperately real and dangerous. I mean, this shit's dangerous. And normally I wouldn't say that about a lot of paranormal spots. But this is one where like there are very real consequences to
Yeah.
interacting with House of Wills. And it wants it right now. Like you said, like out of nowhere, it's suddenly in everybody's consciousness that's into the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very interesting. Very.
Yeah. Yeah. That is really interesting. And it is really weird to think that, we're still devoting parts of us to it,
Right.
even if we haven't been there.
Right. Right.
You know, that it's, yeah, that's just wild. It's wild. I,
Yeah.
and I don't know why, it seemed like such a fascinating thing, and it doesn't really sound that fascinating, but to me, it was just like, oh my God, I have to know. I have to know. Like, this
Yes.
place is crazy. It's fascinating. And it's like, but you know, I can't stress enough, like, reading about it, it's really not. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
other than like some points about it, but I think that goes back to what you were saying about it being such like a deeply personal experience.
Hmm.
And those consequences are so deeply personal too,
Yeah.
that it's not like you can say, oh, everybody that comes out of there is going to get sick, or everybody that comes out of there is going to face, some weird subconscious fuckery
Right.
that they've never experienced before. Um, and I think that's part of the scariest thing, is that you don't know how it's going to affect people and how they're going to be affected by it.
Right. Especially since people are normally very dismissive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like like if their mental health starts to tank, well, they'll be
Hmm.
like, oh, it's because work or this. Like, you're not immediately going to go to, oh, I went to this spooky spot and suddenly my mental health issues exacerbated. Like,
Hmm.
especially if it's subtle,
Yeah.
you'll find any mundane reason possible, which is the normal and like the reasonable way to move forward. You don't want to jump to paranormal conclusions. And yet, that's also the why it's so effective, why this entity
Hmm.
is so effective because it plays on our hyper logical, hyper rational way of moving through the world. Um, that it can just kind of tip the scales a little bit. Like it just puts its thumb on the scales a little bit to make you just a little bit more depressed, just a little
Hmm.
bit more, you know,
Hmm.
self-flagellating or whatever it is. And just, you know, m those voices just ratchet up a little bit. And you wouldn't even know that that
Yeah.
was a different, an outside influence. So yeah,
Mm.
you're
It's
right.
scary. It is. It is. Yeah. The book, not so much, but
Right.
thinking about it and thinking about how this place exists, and and the corroborations between your experience and his, even, um with cause and effect and everything like that. I think that's uh just
Yeah. 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 So much weirdness that I hope someone like a super hardcore researcher gets their teeth into this because there's just so much there. Like
hmm.
this is such an amazing story that like I hope somebody feels inspired to like dive deep and really
Yeah.
get into the history, the hidden history, and like why was it hidden to begin with?
Hmm.
What's going on there? So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not me.
No, no. I mean, I'd be interested to see what the neighborhood was like before it was built, and what.
Yeah, because it was Jewish. It was a Jewish
Hmm.
neighborhood.
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, just to see what the history of that neighborhood, and you know what all may have happened there. Kind of like how, I was thinking, and this might be totally off base. I don't know. Like I said, not been there, but I was thinking about that, and I was trying to think about like how Franklinton, super old, and how that 1913 flood kind of has created this hotbed of activity
Right,
in this neighborhood, even though a lot of that neighborhood has changed and different and no longer even there.
right,
But did something like that happen there? I mean, not necessarily a flood or anything like that, but like, did something happen in that neighborhood or in that area that maybe caused energies and spirits and things like that to sort of flock to this one place?
right,
And did all of that spiritual flocking happen despite the Masonic influence, or because of the Masonic influence? Does it predate, or did it start well after?
right,
And what came first, the big like alien mold entity, or the other stuff? I don't know. I think that would be very fascinating to find out, but I do not have that kind of attention span.
right. Yeah. And like before we close this out, like I keep forgetting there's this really interesting church that's right next to House of Wills. It's now a Baptist church, and it's one of the most like one of the largest, I think, in the nation, but definitely in the state of Ohio. And it's beautiful and like has this gigantic stained glass dome over it, and it used to be a Jewish temple, but is now a Baptist church, which is really interesting. And like all like Rachel, Elizabeth, and I, all three of us had this distinct impression that the two buildings were intrinsically linked somehow, that they're at least in conversation with one another in one way or another. But we don't like the quick, brief uh experience, we didn't really get to explore into it, but there's definitely something else happening with this Baptist church that's literally right next door. Like
Yeah.
another missing piece to this whole
Hmm.
crazy ass
Yeah.
puzzle. So I don't know,
Yeah.
like
I'd like to touch the buildings.
right, right. Oh my gosh. Like
Just touch them. I don't
I
have to go in. I could just touch them.
just touch it. Yeah. Like I feel like when I go back, that's gonna be part of the exploration. But like I want to go back with like an army of intuitives.
Give me on a good day, I might say yes.
Yeah, good. We'll
Then we'll
figure
go to the goth bar afterwards. Go dancing.
I love it. I love it. That's where goths belong.
Yeah, right. Right. Not fucking up energy traps. God. Oh shit. Yeah, that's so cool, but so weird,
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of those where I'm like, oh, people should genuinely be afraid of this. So like it's like the wild animal analogy where it's like, a lot of these paranormal spaces you can enter them and like as long as you have a genuine respect, and a lot of people
Mhm.
think that respect means just not provoking, but it's like, no, you need to like be fully in your own bodily autonomy and be able to differentiate your energy from
Mhm.
anything that's outside of you, which is hard, as I learned, right? It can be very hard, even when you have reached high levels of mastery with that. Um, and so like, but for most of these paranormal spaces, all you're dealing with is like some earthbounds or thought forms and maybe some tulpas. And so most people are generally safe going into
Mhm.
those spaces as long as they're not actively trying to create harm. Um, but like with all wild animals, like you don't know which one's going to like fucking go berserker on you. And House of
Right.
Wills is a berserker.
Ugh. Yeah. Feral.
Feral,
Clearly.
exactly. Rabid even.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing
You're
this.
so welcome. This was so much fun. Thank you for asking me.
I was
I
like,
appreciate you and I love you.
I love you too. No, thanks for taking one for the team and reading the okayest paranormal book ever.
I mean, I would probably give it, out of 5 stars, I'd probably say like a 2.75.
Oh, that's nice.
And like it's not the worst I've ever read, but
Yeah,
the editor really needed to do a better job.
if there was one.
Yeah, if there even was one. If there even was. Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, my friend.
Yep.
Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you have an amazing rest of your day.
Okay.
And I'm going to stop recording, but stick around.
Okay.
Okay, my friends, before we go any further, I want you to do me a favor and close your eyes. And I want you to feel into your body. And I want you to feel into your heart space. And imagine that you are dropping a grounding cord, like an actual like cord or a little tunnel or a root system, whatever works best for you, from your heart down to the source core of Earth. And I want you to imagine that anything and everything that is not you is leaving your system down that column or root system or cord, whatever you imagined. Anything that's not you is leaving out of your physical body and your energetic system to be transmuted and redistributed by the earth. Just take a couple of breaths and know that this is happening, whether you feel it or not. Good. So I hope you enjoyed that fun interview that I did with Jeni. I hope you found it interesting, especially as we kind of got into what, at least I, and she agrees with me, what I think is at the House of Wills, the entity and its influence. The lack of information around House of Wills is very interesting. Though, talking to my friend John Killian, who has way more experience with these kinds of properties, he says that lack of information about the property and the owners is actually very common, which I didn't realize. It's still bizarro to me, but I believe him when he says it's actually a really common occurrence with a lot of these properties. And yet, I think that's a travesty. And I think that's why I enjoy paranormal spots so much. These different haunted houses and the paranormal walking tours and anything that has to do with the darker side of history. It preserves a part of the human experience that is often overlooked in a lot of mainstream history or the dominant narrative of any given place that you go to. So regardless of my personal opinions about, the person who owns House of Wills or anything else, I am very grateful that there is this opportunity to learn a part of history that would otherwise be completely obliterated from the history books. House of Wills and its weird and interesting history is getting preserved because people are genuinely curious about the ghost, about the hauntings, about this unusual part of existence. And with those stories of the spooky comes the very real history that underlies the whole narrative of the space. So that is the beauty of paranormal tourism, even when I can be very critical of it, while also being part of the problem. It's the whole thing. It's the yes and of it, right? Like, without paranormal tourism, there would be less opportunity for these kinds of stories to be heard again. So yes, very interesting stuff. All right, so thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Jeni for agreeing to do this interview with me. It was so much fun. It was very revealing, like listening back to this interview and the judgment that I hold of Daryl Marston, and then while speaking those judgments, realizing that I'm just being very judgmental of myself as well. That a lot of the things that I was kind of making fun of him for, I had to look into the mirror and be like, oh, I'm doing that too. Oh, I'm doing that too. And that's what this experience is showing me. So very humbling. This whole House of Wills story is a story of humility. Very interesting stuff. Okay, so thank you again. If you want to follow me, please check out my Instagram. It's which_way_from_here. You'll see the you'll see the logo. That is a great place to interact with me. Any comments, any questions, let me know if you think I'm doing a kick-ass job. If you don't think I'm doing a kick-ass job, I guess you can tell me. It'll hurt my feelings a little bit, but I get it. Any and all engagement is welcome. I also have a YouTube channel where I will post both the podcast itself, as well as the raw video of the interview that's completely unedited. It's just literally the Zoom recording, and I just put that up there. I'm hoping to eventually expand the YouTube channel to include maybe some lives, different places that I go to, footage of that. We'll see. Like, I'm cooking on some stuff for sure. Talking to Rachel about different places that we want to check out together. So definitely keep an eye on that. If you want to support me, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and you want to support me so that I can keep doing this work, you can do Buy Me a Coffee. It's under Corinne Labita. I'm the only one in the world. I'll also have that link in the show notes. Anything and everything is deeply appreciated. And I'm currently working on a Patreon as well, where not only am I going to post things, but post the podcast, but I also want to maybe do some fun side things. Like I was talking to John Killian again about doing an MST3K kind of deal with watching paranormal shows and just like kind of hating on them, but like with love, hating on them with love, if that's even a thing. And possibly doing like tarot readings and having those kinds of conversations and meeting and just discussing the energetics of the month. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate you. I promise you I'm working on the next episode of House of Wills. But like I said, it has been quite the uphill battle. I appreciate the patience. It'll get done. It's going to get done. It's a new year. We're doing it. All right, everybody. I love you. Thank you. See you next time.